Good morning. This is Chris Lawton, Director of Knowledge Exchange from Farm Credit East. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this morning, Food Hubs, What Are They and Why Do They Matter to the Northeast? Just a few technology tips before we begin. Thank you for joining us. All attendees are muted throughout the presentation to avoid background noise. Every once in a while, be sure to tap your mouse so that your screen does not go to sleep during the presentation. There will be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of both presentations. Or rather at the end of both Jim and Malini's presentation. Questions can be text chatted in at any point during the presentation, and they will then be asked of the relevant presenter at the completion of both presentations. To send in your question, click on the red arrow to expand the GoToWebinar control panel. This arrow is typically found in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You will then see a text box where you can type in your question and send it in. Finally, a recording of today's presentation will be available on the members-only site of farmcrediteast.com for playback at a later time. If you are having trouble accessing this recording, please contact Christy Schmidt at 1-800-562-2235. And finally, for more information on our webinar series, visit farmcrediteast.com/webinars. And now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jim Putnam, who will introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning. On behalf of Farm Credit East, we really welcome all of you on this kind of cold and damp Northeast day to the last of our webinars for this year. And as Chris said, the topic is on food hubs. Now, I'll go out on a limb here and confess that a year ago at this time, if you'd given me a quiz on food hubs, I would have not known what exactly you were talking about. But sometime early in the year, the topic came up, and I went out to Google and did what most of us do to learn about something rather than to embarrass ourselves, and found some neat information from our first speaker. And as the year progressed, this is a topic that's got a lot of buzz around the Northeast, quite frankly. And I think it's kind of exciting because it really gets to this holy grail for those of us in Northeast agriculture of how do we better tap into this tremendous local demand for quality food products. How do we turn that into an opportunity for Northeast farmers of all types and sizes and products and locations and so forth. So it's a topic that I think we can all learn more about, and also is going to be something that we at Farm Credit East are delving into some of the opportunities during 2013 and beyond. So with that, our first speaker is Jim Barham. He is an agricultural economist with the Marketing Services Division of USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. He's got quite a bit of experience prior to USDA overseas, doing some different things there, and I think has been kind of at the forefront in his 5 years with USDA on developing the whole food hub and kind of new marketing initiatives type of opportunity. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jim Barham.
Jim, appreciate it. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Let me see if I can bring this up, and hopefully you can see the full screen. Again, thanks, Jim. Thanks, Chris. Thanks to everyone at Farm Credit East for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. So as Jim said, I worked at USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. I've been working on food hub work pretty much since I've gotten to USDA. At the time that I came here, we didn't necessarily have the term food hub. I was looking at what I was calling at that time alternative distribution channels for small farmers. Not a very sexy phrase. Food hub certainly has a little bit more of an engaging type of quality to it. And I'll go through fairly quickly what we mean by food hub, and then give you some examples and so forth. So as I said, a little overview here. We've done a lot of research around food hubs the last couple of years in partnership with others. So I'll talk a little bit about some of our findings to date. some of the lessons learned, and then quite a few food systems resources. And then I have here reference materials, and really what I've done is I've given Farm Credit East a much larger deck of PowerPoint slides that they can share if people are interested to learn even more about our Food Hub work. It gives a lot more of the data that we've collected on the survey work, a lot more around best practices, and so forth and so on. So you can always get in touch with Farm Credit East for further information. Of course, at the tail end of this presentation, I'll also have some websites that I recommend you take a look at as well. So first thing I want to talk about is Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food, which a lot of my work to date is kind of encaptured in. The Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative was launched by Deputy Secretary, the second in command of USDA, Kathleen Merrigan, and it really was an opportunity to kind of really spur a national conversation on what does it really take to develop viable local regional food systems. There was a lot of interest within USDA around local food, no doubt, before Kathleen Merrigan came around, but it was really disjointed. You know, I was working over in Agriculture Marketing Service doing some work. Others were, say, over at Rural Development doing different work on local food systems. You had NIFA, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, doing different types of things. And really, there was no real coordinated, systematic effort to how do we link these different departments and different agencies together in order to, you know, reduce certain redundancies and really leverage our resources. And so that really, in many ways, is what the Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative is around, kind of across agency collaborations around the specific topic of local and regional food system development. Within the Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food, we essentially set up a number of subcommittees to tackle specific issues to kind of give us something really concrete to focus in on. And I lead up a task force through Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food on regional food hubs because we knew, you know, and many people have known for quite some time that with this tremendous demand for local food, there is still a number of structural barriers that prevent a lot of small to mid-sized, even large-sized growers to be able to tap into this market space. And so we decided to focus one of our topic areas around distribution. So within the task force, it's interagency, much like many of the other task forces that we've set up under Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. You can see the different agencies that are involved. We're also coordinating efforts with other federal agencies. I've had many conversations with people at the Department of Commerce, Treasury, Health and Human Services, CDC, HUD. All these folks have taken a more keen interest in food system development as a viable way to create new jobs in regions and across the country. So why regional food hubs? Well, I've talked a little bit about, obviously, on some of the distribution challenges that exist. Clearly, we know on the demand side there is huge, huge demand for locally grown foods. And what I have here is just a few of many statistics I could have pulled around this demand for local food. You know, it's within the National Grocers Association, its barriers somewhat important in the choice of the food stores. 89% of the fine dining restaurants surveyed by the National Restaurant Association serve locally sourced items. Many of the larger retail chains now promote local sourcing. So we really see, and this is a tremendously hot topic. People keep saying, is this a fad? And I would say uncategorically, no, this is not a fad. A fad is mini cupcakes. Local food is here to stay. It's a major part of what will continue to be part of the larger growing market share in U.S. agriculture and as well as other places of the world. On the supply side, we know that there are challenges that exist. Certainly on the distribution, processing is another huge thing, and just having some of this infrastructure that would allow many of these producers to tap into these wider markets where the demand is there. And we know that this issue of supply side challenges is particularly acute for operators of mid-sized farms, which in many ways we're looking at what we call these ag-of-the-middle farms, farms that are too large to necessarily compete effectively, be able to really tap into these direct marketing channels, farmers markets, you know, community support agriculture, yet at the same time are really too small to compete effectively in these traditional wholesale supply chains. So we look at food hubs as this opportunity to help retain, grow that ag-of-the-middle farmers and to encourage smaller farmers to scale up their operations. So what is a food hub? And really, you know, there's a lot of different definitions out there. You know, people are coming up with a variety of ways of how they kind of define, explain what a food hub is. And for us, and it is still essentially a working definition, we have it here, you can kind of read it, but there's some key aspects of this. First and foremost, it's either a business or organization that is actively managing three things: aggregation, distribution, and marketing. Now, they may not be doing all this themselves, but they're certainly the major supply chain logistics person involved in this aggregation, distribution of marketing. And here's the other key piece of source identified food product coming from local and regional producers, and that allows these producers the ability to satisfy this growing demand, whether in the wholesale, retail, or institutional market for local product. So I'm kind of a visual guy, and for a long time I just had that definition. I spout that out, and I realized, we need some kind of image to be able to, maybe capture what food hubs do, how they function, and what services they provide. So this is my feeble attempt to get a bit creative and show kind of what food hubs are. And the concept for me, as I often explain to people, is, well, it's almost like an hourglass where it starts out wide, where you have a lot of products from a number of different producers out there. It narrows into that key aggregation point, and then as it's distributed to a wide number of different channels, it broadens out again. And so this is just, conceptually kind of what food hubs do. You can see on the left-hand side they work with, very small farms, mid-sized farms, and even larger farms. And then they really exploit a number of different types of markets, at the top talking about kind of representing institutional markets, schools, hospitals, universities. Then you even have, in some cases, food hubs going direct to consumer. They're offering, CSA shares. They are, aggregating from a number of different farms, setting up subscription, or even having buying clubs, and even mobile markets are part of the kind of the food hub realm. Of course, you have grocery stores, restaurants, and then food hubs also are acting as aggregators for other distributors, more mainline, broadline distributors, who are then, for distributing that food to their clients. That's the function of a food hub, but food hubs also offer a number of services, and that's what in many ways distinguishes a food hub from just a typical produce distributor. On the producer side, they're actually linking producers to markets. They're doing farm pickup. They're heavily involved in different types of production services and trainings, whether that's on production or post-harvest handling, providing business management, business enterprise development for farmers, a number of these types of things, helping with food safety, liability, so forth and so on. On the operational side, that has a lot to do with the function of the food hub, everything, again, from the aggregation distribution to even some light processing, product storage, so forth and so on. And then they're heavily engaged in their community. Food hubs are locally based. They're there to serve their local community. It doesn't mean they don't have a wider reach, but at their core, they're looking to develop the community they're in, and food hubs is one way of doing that. And whether that's through engaging the consumers through buy local campaigns, or being involved in trying to get food into underserved areas, so forth, and you can see some of the other services that some food hubs provide. And here are just some more of the defining characteristics. I won't do overkill here, but I would like to point out this last point here, or last check mark on this list, aims to be financially viable while also having positive economic, social, or environmental impact. Food hubs at their core are triple bottom line businesses. They're looking to, sure, turn a profit. They want to be able to sustain their business operations, yet at the same time, they're looking to see how else can we make an impact within our community, whether direct or indirect, through the services we provide. So just to give you one example, I use this example often. I think I need to switch it up a bit, but part of the reason why I like this example so much is that they called themselves the local food hub, and by all our definitions, they very much fit that. It's a relatively new organization started by two women entrepreneurs just a few years ago in 2009. You can read a little bit there about their mission, but there's a strong sense of how do we improve the economic vitality and promote the stewardship of the land. So a very strong kind of producer base of support, yet at the same time providing healthy food to their region. And their model is basically based on two major programs. One at their core as a local food distributor, but they also have an educational farm where they offer a variety of outreach programs. So the local food hub currently works with about 75 small to mid-sized family farms, and they have their own definition as what they mean by that. They offer an array of different products. Fresh produce is certainly at the top of what they provide, but they are also doing protein products, value-added products, and serve a wide customer base. Schools is a big piece of their market share, as well as restaurants and grocery stores. But then they also serve, senior centers. They sell to the University of Virginia Hospital, and also to distributors, both large regional food distributors like Keeney Produce Company, which is big in the D.C. area, and even Cisco, as well as some local produce distributors as well. And on this slide, this is one of my favorite slides, and it's nice to see when you're here at a screen. It's not so great when you're projecting it on an LCD projector, but as you look at your computer screen, you can get a full sense of the amount of activities that the Food Hub is involved in. At the top, in orange, are core kind of aggregation distribution services. As you go counterclockwise, you begin to see some of the farm and production services they offer. They do a lot of production planning with their network producers to ensure that they have a ready supply. Of course, they're looking at the market and what the buyers are looking for, get back to the producers, and figure out how to be able to match that supply with that demand. As you move down to the bottom, you get more to the educational farm. These slides at the bottom, food production incubator plots, farm worker training, a number of these programs to help provide some of that outreach to the community, for the community to be able to see what agriculture is all about, as well as to offer opportunities for apprenticeships and other interns to be able to work on an actual working farm. So get a little sense of the scale of their operations in terms of sales. They started out in 2009 and saw a pretty tremendous growth trajectory over the last couple of years, almost triple-digit growth. Things have slowed down a little bit in 2012, and that was really intentional. They have made it part of their mission that they don't want to procure food that's further than 150 miles from their facility. So there's a very strong sense of local regional development. They'd rather slow down their pace, be able to build the supply within their area instead of going further out in order to get product. And one of the other reasons why I like this example is the local Food Hub has done a tremendous job of trying to capture some of the impacts that they're having on their community. Here you can see some of the producer impact. One of the things I like the most, or we really enjoy seeing at USDA, is this one statistic that 60% of the producers plan to increase production. And that's really at the core of what we really hope to see accomplished through Food Hubs. Is not that just they're giving a market opportunity for farmers, but that those farmers see this viable market and want to grow their own business, which then either leads to more acreage under production, and even a new set of farmers coming on to take advantage of the opportunities afforded to this or other Food Hubs. And then also, of course, on the economic and social impact side, everything from the fact that the Food Hub itself creates a number of direct job and benefits there, but there's also a larger reinvestment in their local farming community. Again, much of this based on their mission to really build that core community and regional development. So the whole efforts that USDA has been involved in is not on our own. We have some key partners and alliances out there that work with us on the promotion and development of Food Hubs across the country. Probably our most important partner is the Wallace Center at Winrock International and the National Good Food Network that they manage. And we've done a number of things since we really kicked off 2 years ago. We've carried out a national survey of Food Hubs, which I'll go provide a few slides on about some of the results there. And actually, we're about to carry out another survey, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. We have a national database of operating Food Hubs that's well over 200. In fact, we're about to vet a number of Food Hubs, and I think it's going to be more along the lines of 250, 260 Food Hubs that we know of. Not necessarily, it's not all of the Food Hubs that exist, but at least ones that we're aware of. We've published a Regional Food Hub Resource Guide, which if you haven't seen it yet, you can find it on our website, and it provides a lot of the information in terms of what is a Food Hub, what is not a Food Hub, what are some of the impacts Food Hubs are having, and then, of course, because it's a resource guide, there is half of it is both federal and other resources available to Food Hubs for their development. And we've also convened a national gathering of Food Hubs to help really launch a Food Hub community of practice. And I'll talk a little more about that later on. So just a few findings from our Food Hub survey. It's a little bit dated now because we're looking at January 2011. And like I said, we're going to put out another one this January, February to update that. At the time that we put this survey out, believe it or not, we only knew of 72 Food Hubs across the country. And so of those 7245 provided responses, and then we did some follow-up phone interviews with 20 food hub operations to get a little bit more into kind of their financial viability as well as some of the challenges, opportunities for them. So one of the things that just off the bat, and whether this was a small sample, but it certainly rings true as we've studied many more of these food hubs, is that there are certainly some that have been around for a very long time before we ever had the term food hub or used it in this particular way. But a lot of these food hubs or these types of businesses have been around, at least the majority have been around for 5 years or less. Funding has been all across the board in terms of how they funded their operations. In red is when they began their operations, what kind of funding were they looking at or did they receive. And then the blue is how they're currently funding their operations. So within the red, the highest thing was actually in-kind support, really bootstrapping it, sweat equity, getting things up and going. Obviously, they were looking at some help from external sources, whether that was foundation community or from the federal, state, or local government. And you can just see kind of across the board all the variety of ways they've been trying to to be creative to get their operations up and going. As they're currently funding themselves, certainly a lot of the funding now comes from their trading income from the products that they sell. But they also, there's many food hubs that still are looking for continued support, whether from government agencies or from, banks, other financial institutions, et cetera. Food hubs offer a wide variety of products. I mean, certainly fresh produce is one of the things that there's tremendous demand for, and almost all food hubs carry fresh produce. But they also carry a lot of other products, whether that's protein products like eggs, dairy, meat, poultry, some grains, so forth and so on. You can see here the kind of the depth of products offered by food hubs. And then what's their market? I mean, right now, and this pretty much holds true across further studies that we've done beyond this small sample. The key markets, if you're looking at primary, and this is the darker color, primary markets, and that being markets that the majority of products are being sold through. Restaurants, grocery stores, and food cooperatives. Those are the major markets for a lot of food hubs. There are also those markets that there's less barriers of entry. It's kind of the first markets that many food hubs go into. And then from there, you get into some of the more institutional markets. College universities is big, and they've, obviously college universities have really been strongly supporting buying local. You get that from the student groups, a little more active than some institutions in the past. But now you really are beginning to see, obviously, the farm-to-school movement, a lot of interest in buying local there, as well as farm-to-healthcare, so hospitals and other healthcare facilities really interested in looking at sourcing local and the health benefits that might accrue from that. And so, and this is just the last slide I have, which is just food hub suppliers. Well, I think I have one more, which is jobs. But anyway, suppliers, basically, there's a huge range, of course, on how many suppliers or producers food hubs are buying products from. On average 77, median's about 40. And that, and I think that holds true. Between 40 and 75 tend to be how many suppliers some of these newer food hubs. Obviously, as they get bigger, then you obviously get much more suppliers involved. And then the workforce, just real quickly, I would say that on average, food hubs employ about 12 paid staff. There are still a number of food hubs that rely on regular volunteers. You see this particularly with the direct consumer model, where they're aggregating products from a number of suppliers and then selling them directly to consumers, whether it's a CSA or it's a buying club. And they often are relying on some of these volunteers to package put these products into a box in the package in order to get it directly to the consumer. And a lot of times they're actually paid just not with cash, but through credit to purchase food through the buying club. Okay, sales. Now this obviously gives you a very sense of how wide and how different and the range can be between the different food hubs. Obviously, at one end, you have food hub that's grossing $40 million annually, and another that's barely getting up to 50,000. This isn't very useful because you have these outliers to get an average here. So I'll go to the next slide, which is removing a few of those higher higher-end food hubs in terms of their gross sales, and just focusing in on a sample of 29. And it gives you a little better sense of food hubs in terms of their average sales, around 871,000. I often say, most food hubs, averages, they're getting close to $1 million. That doesn't seem that atypical for food hub, even after maybe 3 or 4 years of doing their operations, of getting into about that $1 million in gross sales. So when we did follow-up interviews with 20 food hubs, we looked at some of the financial viability of them. And again, you can define financial viability any way you want, but the way we were looking at it, through your food hub, aggregation, distribution, marketing services, do you cover your operating costs or turning a profit? And if they said yes, we'd go into a little more detail about what that meant. But generally, about half of those of the 20 that we interviewed were financially viable. Another 7 felt like they were very close, within 1 to 3 years of actually getting there. So a good chunk of the food hubs we interviewed were either financially viable or on their way to be financially viable. One of the things that was interesting is looking at those 10 that said they were, all 10 had gross sales of $1 million or more. And that seems to be, when you start looking at that break even for many of these different food hubs, I'm often hearing the term about 1 to 1.5 million is what it's going to take to basically be able to cover all their operating costs, turn profit, basically be a viable business or a sustainable business. And this map here just gives you kind of a sense of where food hubs are listed. And again, this isn't all the food hubs in the whole universe, but at the time we had 200 food hubs. This was around in August that we had known about, and obviously there's strong concentrations in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and the Upper Midwest. So your region, the Northeast, has got a tremendous number of food hubs, but by no means have we reached anything close to a saturation point. Now, food hubs, you can classify them in a lot of different ways. I think people are interested in kind of the legal structure. There is some sense that, well, these are nonprofits that are doing this, trying to help these small farmers out. They're not viable businesses, so forth and so on. Well, that's not really the full picture here, the full story. The largest share of food hubs are privately held. Nonprofits are significant in terms of their entrance into this field of distribution. And then you have cooperatives that could be both producer cooperatives, kind of the classic marketing cooperative, but you're also seeing a lot of these new generation cooperatives where it's multi-stakeholder, it's a producer, it's a consumer cooperative together, or it's even, sometimes producer, processor, distributor, buyer, cooperative. There's a lot of interesting models out there, but they also, in the sum total, make up about 20% of the food hubs based on our list. And then the other way to look at food hubs is just kind of where they're selling their products to. And it does say something about their business model. You have the largest share of food hubs, about 40% almost, that are going direct to consumer. And it's also the largest growth of food hubs is in this model category. You have a lot of these produce delivery companies that are sourcing locally. You have a lot of buying clubs, online buying clubs, mobile markets, and multi-farm CSAs that are really coming online, again, helping to capture that consumers need to have kind of locally grown products. And then the other large market model is the more classic selling to the wholesale market. That is food hubs that are selling to, whether it's restaurants or grocery stores or hospitals, institutions, all those different things. And then a lot do both. They have some direct consumer, and then they're also selling to, a grocery store or restaurant as well. Here you can see just quickly the growth trajectory of a lot of the food hubs over the last 10 years. And, just in 2011, we saw 25 new food hubs established. Of course, there's more. And we're looking at even a probably steeper trajectory once we get the data in for 2012. So what are some of the priority needs of food hubs from a lot of the work we've done? First and foremost, it's just so important to say that, there isn't really a need to build a lot of new food infrastructure. And what I mean by food infrastructure is the warehouses and the processing, facilities. They are there, they're underutilized or sitting empty, and a lot of it is about how do we restructure this, how do we renovate these old facilities to make them work for a new kind of food system. So what is needed? Certainly capital improvements to renovate these existing facilities. There's a need for working capital for the business management systems that coordinate these supply chain logistics, the core of what the food hubs do. And then there's a tremendous need as well for enterprise development, training, and technical assistance on the producer side. And there's a lot of, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, government entities getting involved, and how do we grow the supply to meet the local demand. And that, and I will say there is no question in the conversations I have with most food hubs, those worth any of their weight in really those what I would call solid businesses that are food hubs run into a brick wall after 4 or 5 years, and it's not because there's not enough demand, there's not enough market, it's that they simply can't find enough supply locally to meet that demand. So there's a key piece of this, which is how do we continue to build that supply of food hubs. Many food hubs are doing that, providing the resources or finding the partners to be able to help growers meet the wholesale demands of these buyers, as well as just to grow their businesses. And the big picture is, and I think this is something that people, and I hear this from the private industry a lot as well, there's a lot of distributors out there. Why aren't we just supporting the existing distributors? And by all means we try to, but there is just simply a lack of aggregation in particular that is not adequately being served by the marketplace. So in other words, you have a lot of produce distributors out there not particularly interested in sourcing from a lot of local small and mid-sized growers. And whether it's an interest or capacity on their own part, what food hubs are filling more than anything else is this aggregation piece of it. So they have, and there are potential partnerships with the existing distribution system for food hubs to be those aggregation points for regional distributors, provide that reliable and ready supply, offer a broad and more diverse selection of products, as you can see here I've listed. And I think that this is something that even our research really, I was surprised to see, was when we looked at what markets are you selling to, almost half of the food hubs are selling to other distributors. So this is a role that they see themselves playing. It doesn't mean they totally discount or are not interested in doing the forward distribution and doing the marketing and sales to the end buyer. But it's also one of these key pieces that we're going to continue to see happen as more mainstream distributors get involved in local food hubs, maybe playing more of this aggregation role instead of actually distribution. And just real quickly on some best practices here, and I've got a lot more of this type of stuff in the reference materials at Farm Credit East or on our website I can share with you. But I mean, a key piece of this, and it may go without saying, is that product differentiation is key. Food hubs don't sell commodities. If they sold commodities, they would be out of the market. They're fulfilling a market need for local, but it's not just the fact that they're sourcing from 50 miles away or 100 miles away. Is that they're really adding a number of unique product attributes, whether that's something on the production side, so that it's sustainably grown or it's organic, or whether it's on the social equity, that how the farms treat their farm workers, or it's on really just telling a compelling story about that we source from small family farms and we're interested in local development. Again, everything that basically gets to the idea that they're not selling plain vanilla products. If they did, they wouldn't be in business. There's plenty of other distributors that do that. One of the key aspects for many food hubs, particularly with their strong focus on locals, they need to be creative about how they're going to be able to carry products essentially the entire year. They, as food hubs grow and they begin to invest in facilities and other infrastructure, you've got those overhead costs that you need to cover. You can't have an empty warehouse sitting there for 6 months of the year. So, adding more product lines, not just fresh produce, but getting into value-added products, non-perishables, proteins, all these things help be able to offer their customers something around the year, all year round. There's some other things here as well. Obviously, I've talked a little bit about this idea of think farmers first. Ultimately, the bottom line is here is that it's all about supply, and maintaining a good relationship with the supplier base so that they'll continue to sell to you, which means getting them good prices for their product and helping to grow their business as well, because ultimately it's in your best interest. And then sweat the small stuff. A lot of food hubs are really small, bootstrapping organizations that don't necessarily have a team of sales staff like you would at a broadline distributor. So, even your truck drivers need to have to be extremely competent in knowing about the products, where they come from, being able to tell the story. One of the best stories I heard was one particular food hub was putting tremendous resources in training their truck drivers to be essentially their salespeople, to be that kind of HR, teach them the interpersonal skills, because ultimately they were the face of the company. That's who the buyer saw on a day-to-day basis. If there was any particular problem, that truck driver was the one who's going to have to sort it out. A lot of those types of things that you may not necessarily think of when you're looking at a larger business, but here it was obviously incredibly important to them. So the National Good Food Network, the Food Hub collaboration that I mentioned earlier, there's really it's kind of a four-pronged approach. On one side, the National Good Food Network with the Wallace Center is focusing on a certain segment of food hubs, providing them targeted technical assistance and some other resources. On the community of practice, this is really about creating a professional network of food hubs so that we can accelerate some of the innovations, increase the commerce between the food hubs, help them with peer-to-peer learning, build them so that there's a less likelihood of business failure to happen if they have this supportive network underlying their own business operations. On the technical assistance side and research, USDA is particularly involved in this category with them, and I'll go ahead to the next slide, and you'll see a few of the new Food Hub research initiatives, some of those that I myself and others at USDA are taking on. We've gotten a lot of interest from either food hubs that are starting out or even food hubs that are looking to scale up to a larger facility about everything about, how much space do I really need? What kind of capacity will I be able to take on if we move into this size of space? What are the costs? So forth and so on, just everything to do with the facility itself. So we're actually carrying out a number of case studies on facility design and capacity and operations. Along with that, we get a lot of questions, maybe less from the food hub, but certainly from the wider community of development people who want to understand the economic impacts of food hubs. So one of the things we're doing right now is we have a research project with Cornell University, which is measuring economic impact of a particular food hub in New York, and we'll be using that input and output in planned economic development model and hopefully be able to apply that to a number of other food hubs so that we can begin to get a better sense of the kind of impact they're having within their communities. Somewhat related to it, but it's kind of another area that we at USDA are very interested in is the wholesale produce markets. Obviously, in the Northeast, you have one of the largest ones at Hunts Point. I would also throw in the Philadelphia produce wholesale market that just got up last year or 2 years ago. There's tremendous opportunities for linking this type of infrastructure to local food systems development. So one of the things we're doing is we're going to be piloting a project with the wholesale market to begin to track the amount, price, volume of local and regional food that's going through to get a better sense of where they are now and how we can grow this piece of their market for them. And as I alluded to before, we'll be carrying out a second national survey of food hubs in partnership with Michigan State University and the Wallace Center, and we hope to get that out February 2013. A couple of resources worth taking a look at. My colleague and I, Adam Diamond, basically profiled 8 food hubs in this first publication, Moving Food Along the Value Chain. It provides a lot more of the nitty-gritty detail of how these operations work. And then the second guide here, or the second publication, Regional Food Hub Resource Guide, a little bit more broad, but yet, again, provides, I think, some nice information about resources available to support food hubs. And here you can see the website. You could just always Google USDA food hubs, and you'll get to this website. And I would, and so clearly all our resources are up there as well as others. And then I would also recommend checking out the National Good Food Network's Food Hub collaboration site. One of the things in particular that they're good at is webinars, and there's been a number of webinars, not just with food hubs, but other food systems related work that I would highly recommend. And since I know, talking to Farm Credit East, that we do get some producers on here, and not just for producers, but really anyone, this is one of those totally, which should have gotten a lot more publicity, but it's this amazing site that I even recently myself found, even though I'm at USDA, Start to Farm. This really, if you click on this site and you look under the resources section here, you can literally do searches by your zip code, by a specific topic area. Let's say you want to, you're looking for infrastructure resources, and it will sort through and give you a, a laundry list of resources available in your area, not just from the USDA, but across the federal government, local, state, regional resources. It's really, I can't recommend this site enough. And then finally, Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. We have a website there that I think does a very good job of laying out all the resources available at USDA for local food systems work. But one of the really exciting things that's been added to this is the Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food Compass. And within that, there's this really neat interactive map that I really would recommend everyone to check out. What we have on there, and this is a level of transparency that I'm really proud of at USDA as well as the federal agency, is but the last 4 years, we've put on there every single project in one way or another related to local food work that USDA has been involved in. And so you can click on your own region, your county, your city, and see who else around me is accessing resources to support local food work. And one of the really amazing and exciting things about this just recently is that we've put up other federal agencies' investments as well. So we have Commerce up there, we have HUD, we have Health and Human Services. All these folks, one way or another, and it's a little more scattered. It's not maybe as concentrated, but at the same time, they've been making investments in food as well, and that's really exciting to see. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and I look forward to answering some of your questions. That's just some of our contact information. Myself, John Fisk at the Wallace Center, and then the National Good Food Network's contact. So again, thank you very much, and I'll turn this back over to Jim and I think Melanie.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. Great overview, a lot of information, and I know you've already generated some very good questions, and we will go to those in a few minutes. But I am going to, at this time, ask Melanie Morrigan to share some additional information with us. Melanie is with the Healthy Food Commerce Investments Group, also is affiliated with Wholesome Wave here in Connecticut, and got a very interesting background. Looks like she did some investment banking in the distant past, but left that a few years ago, started a local foods initiative in Florida called the Red Hills Small Farm Alliance, and some success there, and now working with the Wholesome Foods Initiative, Healthy Food Initiative. So with that, would ask Melanie to share her comments with us.
Thank you very much, Jim and Farm Credit East and all of you who joined us today. I will try and take us through a couple of quick examples and just a discussion of our work fairly quickly so we have time for questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work at Wholesome Wave, specifically what we're doing with food hubs, and then drill down a little bit on the marketplace that these food hubs exist in, and then finish up with a few things for you to consider in your interactions with food hubs. And I think the way to characterize the nature of what I'm going to talk about is I think Jim went through a lot of the what and the why around food hubs, and our team and the investments team at Wholesome Wave works specifically with the how. We are corporate expats, bankers and consultants who have worked in the larger marketplace side and are now coming to apply our skills in this space and try and help build healthy businesses out of these food hubs. I think you should all be able to see my screen now. So Wholesome Wave overall is a national nonprofit that runs innovative programs supporting farms, food, and nutrition. We're 25 states, 300 sites, and we touch thousands and thousands of farmers. And we focus on connecting underserved urban and rural markets and making sure that beautiful regionally grown produce gets to all consumers, and especially those in underserved markets, which have quite a lot of purchasing power. Many of you will know us for our hallmark programs, the Double Value Coupon Program, the Fruit and Vegetable Prescription Program. I am not going to talk about these programs today. I'm going to focus on a new initiative which we launched earlier this year called the Healthy Food Commerce Investments Team, briefly just the investments team. In January, we kicked off with this team to focus on directing capital and business development assistance to regional food hub enterprises. Wholesome Wave was finding itself in a position where on one side we were talking to and meeting these terrific food entrepreneurs, whether they were enterprising farmers who were growing their business, building a pack house to do more aggregation, or a last mile distributor like Farm Fresh Rhode Island focused on getting restaurants and institutions more local food. And then on the other side, we were talking to a wide array of mission investors. And what I mean by mission investor is an investor who is not just looking for a financial return, but is also looking to drive some metrics on the social and environmental side as well. Mission investors typically take higher risk, have longer time horizons, lower financial return thresholds. And of course, those of you who are affiliated with Farm Credit certainly fall in this category, as for many, many years you've been operating in this way. And now there's a nice term to sort of identify the types of investments that many agricultural financiers do. So we put together this team to help touch on a couple of different areas. And I would say just briefly, we are focused on investing in food hubs and then building them to get stronger. So directing that business development assistance, getting sort of in the trenches with the management teams of these food hubs and helping them address all kinds of business issues that they may be facing, whether it's an adjustment to a sales and marketing scheme, figuring out technology, and most recently just working on structuring financing transactions that work for the food hubs. This next slide is how we think about food hubs. And I would think about this as a double click on some of the slides that Jim discussed and Jim showed. For us, food hubs encompass a couple of different kinds of businesses. You know, you've got your first mile aggregators that are really focused on, from the moment of harvest to the first point in the cold chain, what that set of activities and equipment and businesses look like. There are, of course, processing folks, which can range from light processing, like a wash, chop, and bag operation, all the way to more intensive operations that take on slaughter manufacturing. And then we have our last mile delivery folks, folks who really are focused on coordinating with the end customers, whether it's an institution or a household. They're typically in more dense areas, not necessarily out in the field, and they work on, they have a completely different set of business requirements and liabilities. And the segmentation that we've seen there are those that focus on wholesale customers, like groceries or institutions, those that focus on retail and households, some of those large multi-aggregated CSAs that have now grown up and are doing a lot of door-to-door or custom box type programs. A diversified model where they're doing wholesale and retail and sometimes a little bit of light processing. And I'm going to talk later about Grasshoppers and Farm Fresh Rhode Island, which are two that fit this model. And community retail hubs, which probably fit more of the profile you saw Jim mention around, you know, those that rely on a lot of volunteer labor, they're entrenched in the communities, and they might be at a 500 person CSA, but they're not quite a full up and running distribution operation. And so our team at Wholesome Wave does not really focus on the community retail hubs very much. But the real takeaway here, I think, is that depending on which one of these types of businesses you are, you have a very different cost structure. You have very different sales and marketing needs, different technology needs, different regulatory requirements around traceability, and in many cases, different financing. And the financing that looks right for a micro aggregator is a little bit different than a financing that might look right for a large, diversified last mile delivery hub. As Jim mentioned, 60% of the food hubs that you saw are less than 5 years old. So they're young businesses. When you're a young business, there's a lot of risk in the first couple of years, and many of these food hubs are taking on serious financing for the first time. So that kind of financing with a young business takes a bit of risk mitigation. Jim had mentioned that they were seeing about 1 to 1.5 million in gross sales as what's required for a viable business. We agree, and we're starting to see also that 2 to 3 million is what makes you competitive. So our goal is not just for these businesses to be viable, we want them to be competitive as well. And I'll touch a little bit on the competitive markets in just a minute. This just, I think, underscores a larger point around demand and distribution. I won't spend a lot of time here, but there is unprecedented demand for local. It's been documented. New Venture Advisors, a terrific consultant, Kathy Nyquist, has done some good work on measuring the demand around local markets. So those of you who look at Food Hub business plans will find this very useful. But something to think about, Jim had said think farmer first, and we say yes, think farmer first. And when we're working with our Food Hub managers and Food Hub entrepreneurs, we say work customer backwards. So a lot of the Food Hubs have emerged from farmer-driven enterprises. What's happening now is in the consumer markets and in grocery markets, there is obviously an explosion of interest in local, but it's not always coming from an alignment with farmers and agriculture. It's coming from a lot of different places. We're seeing a lot of consumers coming to local because it's connected with health and wellness. A couple of retail-focused Food Hubs, those last-mile deliverers are seeing explosive growth in office delivery, especially when connected with workplace wellness programs. Farm Fresh Rhode Island is a terrific retail household program called Veggie Box, and that's another good example of where customers who are new customers who are signing on to those kinds of programs are not necessarily CSA customers and don't fit the profile of a CSA customer. On the institutional side, if you're a grocer who's sourcing local, well, these are the customers you're dealing with. The customers coming into your grocery store are coming to local for different reasons. We do see a lot of anecdotal evidence about folks who are coming in to support local economy and local business. Farms count as small businesses, but that's really based in pride of place and not as much in supporting the farm down the block. It starts with pride of place. And third, small brands and small stories are seeing a great proliferation now on the grocery and food side. Advertising Age, which is a magazine in the marketing world, had a great article of How America Eats. The top 5 game-changing shifts for grocery and food, and it focused on the proliferation of small story brands. And what this means for Food Hubs is that capability of being able to preserve the farm identity and the farm story beyond just a traceability label that has the farm name and zip code, but more. Being able to convey the brand is important for those customers, whether it's a university dining chef who wants to be able to convey the story to the students. Many Food Hubs are the ones taking on those marketing responsibilities. And then lastly, the search for new flavors and food. Food is a fashion business in many ways. Restaurants have certainly seen that for a while, but those of you who are plugged into the wholesale food business know that ingredients and flavor trends are, almost trade like fashions now. We see kale salads on every menu, from ramps and purple carrots, whatever the trends might be. That search for newness is also driving a lot of why consumers are coming to local. So the reason why a lot of that matters is because of the challenges it's creating for these Food Hub businesses. Increased competition is one of them. Jim focused on local Food Hub in Charlottesville, which is a terrific organization. There's another organization in Charlottesville called Relay Foods, and they also source, they're an online grocer backed by a very serious venture capital money that focuses on household and retail delivery. And while there's certainly a way for them to complement the work of local Food Hubs, competition is often great for a new and growing market. It helps to grow the pie, theoretically. It also puts pressure. These additional competitors for Food Hubs put pressure on the supply. So Relay Foods and local Food Hubs are often working with the same farmers. And Relay Foods is certainly benefiting from a lot of the farmer development work that local Food Hub does. And so thinking about how these different organizations interact with each other and who's paying for what in the supply chain is an important inquiry. We also see challenges around brokering and coordinating more supply. So this just only underscores the supply issue, but institutions who are very serious and even putting price premiums to purchasing more local can't be sold to in the same way that that some customers of the past have. We've seen great innovation with some Food Hubs that really sit down and spend the time to work out, what products and volumes and pricing is appropriate for an institution a season in advance. Grasshoppers, which is a local food distributor that operates all year round in Louisville, Kentucky, goes through all kinds of gymnastics to make sure that they source well to the Jefferson County Public School System. And that is an added capability, that is added personnel and added skills in their organization, and that adds to the cost structure, and it's important to understand how that affects their business operations. On the customer service and account management side, because these consumers are different and changing, we generally see a lot less patient, difference in expectations around the kinds of products and offerings that food hubs are bringing in. So if it's a new institution that's traditionally accustomed to working with traditional wholesalers, it takes understanding that patient for working with a food hub, brokering with the farmer, knowing that you're not just going to get a spot volume and price that you're looking for, but there's a little bit more lead time involved in sourcing local successfully. That's a different customer expectation. And food hubs, I think now, many of them are arguably sufficiently equipped to handle and manage those different customer expectations. And so, how the hubs actually take on those kinds of duties is beginning to change, and that's a challenge we're working with now. And lastly, we're seeing a lot of changes in product formats and convenience. So this translates on the household retail side to sourcing local, but combining it with major grocery trends, major food trends around ready to cook and ready to eat, which really underscores the importance of a food hub having the capability to do some light processing, which for capital or regulatory reasons can sometimes be quite difficult. And we've seen some very agile folks work with different excess capacity in their areas. Grasshoppers does a great job of outsourcing some of the processing and bringing it back in. But institutional customers and household retail customers, some of the newer segments that are coming on now to purchase local, aren't necessarily accepting whole raw products anymore. They're demanding, an institution will be demanding chopped cabbage, not whole cabbage. And those kinds of, being able to respond to those kinds of demands are really what's going to allow a food hub to get from 1 million in sales to 2 million in sales. So for those of you on the call who are financiers or policymakers, I think taking a look at the different business models that each one of these kinds of food hubs represents is important. And rethinking a couple of requirements that you might have around financing or around particular types of regulation, making sure that what you can control that affects the food hub is right-sized for that kind of food hub. One example is for last-mile distributors, we're working on a couple of financings now and structuring a couple of loans, and the security requirements and guarantee requirements for some lenders, even community lenders, are in some cases not a great fit for the way food hubs are set up. Traditionally, this is a capital-intensive business. Management would go out and purchase warehouses, trucks, coolers, things like that. But we're seeing nimble models where some of the best and most well-managed food hubs rent all of their capacity, so they've got no assets. And what that means for the kind of security and guarantees they're able to provide changes the conversation. We're seeing a couple of other lenders that can come to the table and different kinds of mission investors come to the table who are really willing to take a below market rate position or offer lines of credit with more flexible terms or interest-only periods. And I think if you're interested in working with food hubs and you have a financing discussion, really questioning and looking at the terms and seeing how they fit to the business of food hubs is an important conversation because these aren't pure producers and they aren't pure retailers or distributors. I'm going to tell a quick anecdote on a case anecdote on Grasshoppers, which is the distribution last mile distributor I talked about down in Louisville, Kentucky. They are a over half farmer-owned LLC, so they are privately held, but mostly by farmers. And they work in that range that Jim mentioned of about 70 local farms. They support a multitude of jobs directly and indirectly. And one of the most exciting things for us at Wholesome Wave, which hits our mission, is that they source fresh, regionally grown produce to thousands, almost 17,000 students in high-need schools, the students who are on free and reduced lunch. We at Wholesome Wave preference working with food hubs that are able to leverage their infrastructure to serve high-need segments as well. And the case example I'm going to talk about here is the way that many different financiers can work together to help position a food hub for success. We came in, Wholesome Wave helped trigger an investment with Grasshoppers, where we came in and we analyzed the business as bankers and consultants would, and decided that they weren't properly capitalized for the kind of work that they wanted to do. And I think this is a theme that we see with a number of different food hubs. So we committed a small amount of financing, worked very closely with the Kentucky Ag Development Board at the state level and an individual investor, and were able to help coordinate financing that started with a small commitment and totaled $350K commitment. And I will say the state, I know listed here it says 0%. There was actually a 1% transaction fee, so it's not exactly 0%. But I think what was important here was we shared our analysis with the state, our investment analysis, and worked through all of the analyzing the business strategy, analyzing the financials, working with management to come up with a growth strategy for the next couple of years. And with that, helped generate confidence in a number of different investors in what is a terrific regional business that supports, in a very strong way, regional farmers. And we can take some extra questions on that as well. I just want to make sure we get through the time. This is our team. I work with a number of wonderful professionals. Wholesome Wave was co-founded by Michelle Nishan and Gus Schumacher. Gus Schumacher is a wonderful guy that many of you in the New England area may know, former Commissioner of Ag in Massachusetts. Victoria Foster is our New England portfolio manager, and we'll have her contact information in a moment. But she and I are the primary contacts for this team. Daniel Ross is our VP of Business Development, now COO, and Michelle is, of course, co-founder. But our team is very interested in helping, food hubs who have demonstrated a pattern of revenue and who are really working to get bigger and operate better. And we look forward to just fielding any questions and inquiries.
Well, thank you, Malini. Great comments there. Really appreciate your enthusiasm and your description of the opportunity and some of the practical knowledge that you've gained from working with food hubs over the years, and it certainly shows. So really appreciate that, and that kind of is a nice round out to the information that Jim put forward. So at this time, I'd like to go to some Q&A. I want to start by telling, we've had a number of questions about availability of this information once today's webinar is over, and we will post the recording and the information that Jim and Malini have shared with us on our website. At the end of the phone call, Chris Lawton will describe that for you. So that answers a bunch of questions, but there's some other very interesting ones here. So I'm going to go ahead, and Jim, I think the first one is for you. It says, how should we think about linking food hubs to USDA farm-to-school grants, understanding that the RFA process for farm-to-school begins in January 2013?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, I work pretty closely with the USDA Farm-to-School team, even reviewed some proposals for them. And, they had made it pretty clear and explicit that they're looking for innovative distribution and how you can link farm-to-school to food hubs. Although ultimately, not many, I would say maybe 2 or 3 of the total grants were actually food hub related, had a food hub involved in the farm-to-school. My advice there, and again, it's very general, but any grant that you're putting together, if the principal is not the school, you need to create a very strong relationship with the school district that you plan to provide products to, so that you have, so it's not you saying, potentially we're going to reach this school district and this school district and this school district, but specifically, say, Grasshopper. We're working with Jefferson County. We're already supplying, 35 schools, and this, we're with 17,000 kids, and we want to, scale that up and triple it within a year. And this is how we're going to do it, and this is the plan we've put together with Jefferson County to do that. So it's a very specific engagement that can be documented, that you have the letters of support. So again, what I would say, and this, this goes with almost any grant, regardless of farm to school, reviewers are looking, all reviewers have is the piece of paper in front of them to give them the confidence to say, this is a good proposal, this is a good idea, I believe this, let's give it some money. So that confidence only comes from demonstrating some kind of commitment by the parties. So it's having the school district say, we are fully supportive of the food hub. We've talked about the prices. This is what we can do. If we get this injection of capital within this time frame, we feel confident we'll be able to get to this, level of buying or whatever it may be. It's really that, and then demonstrating with the letters of support and that everyone's on board. So I just think that's the approach you need to take. And also just keep in mind, farm to school is an extremely, extremely competitive grant. If you didn't get it last time, you should not feel bad at all. Over 500 applications or something crazy like that. Not that much money, but obviously oversubscribed. But again, that doesn't mean you should be discouraged. If you put your hat in the ring once, you should do it again.
Thanks, Jim. Next question I'm going to invite Malini to answer initially, and then Jim, if you have anything to add, please do so. It goes as follows. We own apartment buildings across the country located in food deserts. We want to establish farmers markets in the parking lots and are having a very hard time getting through to local cities with zoning. Here we are looking to help these food deserts, and we are spending endless time and money to no avail making progress. Any thoughts on how to push this through easier, more efficiently with positive results?
Okay, so this is then the landlord, the real estate owner, asking how to put farmers markets on the properties. Well, I would say without knowing the exact geography of where you are, it's a little difficult to answer specifically, but the majority of places, I think Wholesome Wave has been successful. They've worked with field partners and organizations that are very entrenched in the communities, and in the, from a policy standpoint and from a market standpoint, to work on setting up farmers markets. There are, I think, a number of different creative ways to try and set up healthy food access. And a market is certainly it's one way. I would also say that there are some pretty interesting and innovative things going on. Urban Shelley's is a retail side last mile distributor in Chicago, here where I live, and they're doing a pretty innovative pilot with a couple of low-income housing areas. And the way in which they're setting up drop-off and delivery is one that helps to mitigate the cost for the customers in that area, but also allow Urban Shelley's to not lose money in serving that customer segment. The zoning issues, the first thing I would say is there is a U.S. Conference of Mayors group now that Wholesome Wave was very instrumental in helping to put together around food policy administrators. So the food czars from all the different cities have come together and are seriously tackling a number of issues, much like the one you recommended. And so if you email me, and I think my information is there, I can try and find out more information about your particular geography and city, wherever you're located. But I would also say try and partner. Don't do it yourself. Trying to set up a farmer's market by yourself, that's not what you're in the business of doing. It's a pretty uphill effort. So they look for the organizations in your area that are good at setting up farmers markets or good at working with low-income SNAP shoppers, and go from there.
Okay, sounds like good advice and an offer for technical assistance via the email address. So thank you. Jim, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I follow up on one of the things in terms of finding associations or organizations that establish farmers markets. So on our website, and I can send this link, we maintain the National Farmers Market Directory, but so you can look in your county and see where the farmers markets are or whatever. But beyond that, you can also search for farmers market associations, and these are typically state associations, sometimes regional, sometimes county, but we have a whole listing there. So, based on your geography, you could do a search and see if there's any farmers market associations. That's one of the key people you want to partner with. Also do a search on food policy councils in your area, and that gets to kind of what Malini was saying with the U.S. Mayors, U.S. Conference of Mayors, which was bringing a number of these food policy folks together. So again, farmers market associations from our site as well as food policy councils.
Okay. Jim, I think the next one goes to you, and we'll just kind of rotate around here. But would a food broker that sources local farm products be considered a food hub?
If they've made a strong commitment in the core of their business operations to sourcing locally and promoting both local producers and their local marketplace, it is within reason to have a food broker be considered a food hub. A very good example of that that's been around for a long time is Red Tomato. They don't like to call themselves a broker, but functionally that's what they do. They're based out of Massachusetts. They do not handle any product, but they coordinate the whole supply chain. So it's a little bit more in a brokerage world because there's a lot more supply chain logistics they're involved in. They're working with growers to get them to cooperate, provide on-farm storage as, kind of satellite aggregation spots. And then you have other producers or other carriers then picking product up there, moving it to the market. And of course, Red Tomato's doing a lot of the marketing, getting the, finding markets, whether it's Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, to buy their products. And we do consider them a food hub, and we would certainly look at a number of food brokers with a strong commitment to buying local as food hubs as well.
Yes, we know of the Red Tomato Group, very impressed with their activities, and some of our folks, not me directly, but have a relationship with Mike and the group down there. So thanks for that example that's nearby. Next question, and I guess I'll give this one to Jim, although I think either of you can answer it. So maybe Malini will have an addition. But is the hub the center of the hourglass or the whole thing?
Well, it is the center for sure. And depending on how that food hub is structured, it could have other elements to that. And I'll say that because you could have a cooperative, which a cooperative of both producers and consumers, who would both be growing the product, aggregating it, distributing it to consumers who would also be part of the cooperative. So in that sense, the whole hourglass could be the food hub. Basically, though, generally speaking, most food hubs, work out of that middle section there at that core centralized spot, and work with producers, obviously work to sell their products to different markets.
Malini, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'd agree with Jim broadly. I think that a hub can exist it predominantly exists in the center, but could be on either side as well. If you're, a farmer who wants to set up a cooling facility for a bunch of other 50-acre farmers, in the field, that could in some ways count as a food hub because it's an aggregation, a simple aggregation facility. But you may not be very customer facing. If you're on the customer side and you're only focused on the customer side, but your pricing preferences getting margin back to the farmer, you're a food hub too. You're just only on one side of the hourglass. I think the larger diversified models are the ones where you see everything happening. But there, I think depending on which side of the funnel you're in too, your average operating margins are going to be very different. So I think there's no one type of hub.
Right.
No universal.
Yeah, and I'll just add, the food hub is a term of convenience that really helps us encapsulate what we're all talking about, all these variety of models out there, how you're getting local regional food to the markets where they want it in new and innovative ways. And sometimes the whole hourglass, sometimes it's just a central part of it that's coordinating that. But yeah, they really do encapsulate all these various models we've been talking about today.
Yeah, I hear you both saying one size does not fit all, that human creativity adapts different organizational forms to these various initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So let me go to the next one. I think it's a follow-up to a previous question. how do I find food hubs in our apartment locations? Our residents could be another customer. Maybe this is even an alternative to establishing a farmer's market. And Jim, I think you mentioned that you have a online finder, so maybe you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've got on our site, you know, in the website I gave you on Food Hubs, we have a listing of, I think it's 220 food hubs. We're about to update that before the end of the year, so it'll probably be 250. We have them organized by state. You can look in your particular city and see what food hubs are there. We also, on that, you know, talk about the type of model. Are they direct to consumer, or are they more wholesale, or are they kind of a mix of both? So you can kind of look at that. We provide the website so you can find out some contact information from there. You can also, the other website I gave was to the Wallace Center, and they also have a parallel directory and also actually a nice map that we don't have up on ours that you can then search by the map as well.
Okay, I'm going to, on the next question, I think both speakers are going to have something valuable, but I'm going to start with Malini and then go to Jim. What support, financial or other, does USDA offer to individuals or groups looking to set up a new food hub? What are the next steps? What are the next steps with this project? And I'm going to open that up to, I'm going to say USDA and other sources, because I don't think USDA is the only game in town in terms of providing startup assistance. So Malini, you want to start us off with that one, please?
Sure, and I'll let Jim drill down on the actual USDA specific resources. But what we've seen is there are a number of foundations and economic development commissions that are supporting feasibility studies, and I think that's important. The further more important piece of it is funding pilots. So funding the actual activity, and there are, I think the most important piece is just trying to say, okay, where am I going to get some funds to just try and rent the warehouse, work on collecting the product, aggregating it or distributing it, renting a truck, whatever it might be. You saw in a number of the hubs, they started off with very small sales and rapidly grew. But it takes some initial seed capital to just even get that first 50,000 in sales. And we've seen a number of hubs get that seed financing from either municipal sources that are interested in testing out a food hub model. We've seen foundations, and I'm sure the USDA also has some resources as well. If you have really strong relationships in the community, you could also just forward sell. If you have an anchor institution like a university or a hospital that's willing to say, I'm going to commit a $50,000 contract, and you show me what you can bring me. And you've got a good entrepreneur or entrepreneurial team that takes that contract and then goes out and sources from farmers and is able to just prove that traction. I think there are a variety of ways to get that. You have to have a plan in place more than anything, whether it's a full-blown business plan that you've had assistance getting. There are a number of resources where you can get business planning grants. I've seen a lot of those come through economic planning commissions. But I would also say what's important is also funding the pilot as well, which you can do through, in some cases, institutional customers.
Okay, so I'll jump in. So the easy answer is just look at the Food Hub Guide, which basically I spent quite a bit of time looking through all the USDA grant programs available as well as loan programs, and then looked at some other federal programs as well. And there's about 24 different grant programs and loan programs through the federal agency that can fund specific aspects of food hub development. And I have broken it out there in terms of things like business planning feasibility versus infrastructure investments, working capital, research, technical assistance. And it breaks out there, and you can look at the charts to see what grants may fit. And then it also includes eligibility within that. But I will say, given all that, on the USDA side, probably the largest share of money available for food hubs is through rural development. And our rural development agency is basically administered at the state level. And I really recommend and encourage any of you, if you do not know your representatives of rural development at your state, wherever in the Northeast, begin to get to know them, start talking to them about what your plans are, and they can then structure and say, well, if you're interested in this particular grant program, say Rural Business Enterprise Grant can fund some of the feasibility, or if you were a producer, this value-added producer grant program. So I think that's one key thing right there is begin to know your rural development office and the people that run the grant programs through there. And again, there's a lot more advice and information in the resource guide. The other thing I'll say is that most of these food hubs that really got up and going did it by really tapping into what assets are available at my community. And whether that's through sweat equity, whether that's through friends and family, whether that's through a small local foundation or a little state development or a local development organization that is going to fund that seed capital part of it. Doesn't take a lot to get up and going. There's a lot more of that kind of social capital and building of those relationships with both the producers and the market that is the investment that needs to be made up front. And you can, and a lot of times you might be able to tap into local resources to do that. And the more local you keep it, the more likely that you can begin to build more quickly than you can if you try to access a federal grant program. It take you half a year to put one in and wait another half a year to get the actual money, and you may not even get it. So I always look at a lot of these federal grant programs is much better for kind of bridge capital when you're looking to scale up your operations. You have a little longer time horizon. You have some experience. You've showed some success early on. And then, you can go in for some of these larger grants to really grow your business from there, as opposed to say, well, we're going to wait around until we get a federal grant to get up and going. That's crazy, because you're going to miss all kinds of local opportunities and local assets that might be available if you spend too much of your resources focusing on these larger federal grants.
Can I add one more thing too? For that early stage, right, to just get up and running, we have seen a multitude of great nimble food hub startups partner with food banks, which have tons of excess capacity to run. They have trucks, they have coolers. Very often, for many hours in the day, those trucks are quiet, and the coolers often have excess capacity because food banks turn over their products so quickly. And Green Market New York is a good example. They're incubating their last mile distribution system in City Harvest, which is a food rescue, and it operates like a food bank. And that I could probably list off many more, but that is certainly a trend that we're seeing now, where these distributors are partnering with food banks to either get subsidized or free capacity for the early months of starting up.
Yeah, that's a great point, Melanie, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Green Market is a really good example of that. They got some small seed money from some local foundations, but then really it was the partnership with City Harvest that allowed them to have the space to get themselves up and going. And now they've already outgrown that space, but now they have a track record. They've been up for a year, or it's not even been a year, but their sales have already been so tremendous that now they can start making a pitch and begin to look at some bigger investors about a larger facility that will accommodate their growth. I mean, other examples, Common Market in Philadelphia, when they got started, also worked with a food bank that provided some storage capacity for them. And now they're about to make over $1 million investment in renovation of a new facility that will see them be able to grow for the next 5 to 10 years. Rochester Food Link is a food bank that we actually have listed as a food hub, because they really are carrying out food hub distribution marketing activities on behalf of local farmers. That's just one example, and there's a lot of other ways to kind of think about those. For some, might be the untraditional partners can really have assets that could accommodate what food hubs are trying to accomplish.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Good answers there. We're going to this next question. I'll pose it to Jim and Melanie. If they're not sure, then I'm going to call in Bob Smith, who's our governmental affairs leader. But it goes like this: is there language supporting food hubs in the Farm Bill?
The language, well, there might be a few things that I'm not aware of. The one thing I am aware of, because it affects my particular program area, our program area runs the Farmers Market Promotion Program, okay, grant program for direct marketing activities. There's language in both the House and the Senate version to expand that to include another additional $10 million. So it's at $10 million now, but another additional $10 million to expand it to include quote-unquote local food enterprises. And we will be going through that process if the Farm Bill is passed of developing that program area. And that will be the singular, well, the most likely vehicle to fund food hub activity at USDA, which won't have any constraints in terms of geography, like rural development, how it has to be in a rural area, you know, and also eligibility will be open for for-profit as well as nonprofit and other entities. So that's the language that's in there now, and you know, of course, who knows what will actually happen? But it is encouraging that the language was in both the House and Senate version.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I'm going to go to, I think, one last question so that we finish on time, and I really appreciate all the questions that have been posed here because it really allows us to have a rich debate. I do want to, I think there's a couple of, I'm going to take them as comments rather than questions, and so before we go to the last question, I want to read those. First one, it's from Kate Ballantyne, and she says, on that point, we at Connecticut Food Bank are interested in this here in Connecticut. So if anyone wants to talk further, feel free to email me at kballantyne@ctfoodbank.org, and we'll find that is a reference on the follow-up material here. But sounds like Kate is interested in talking to folks who might be interested in partnering on food hubs with the Connecticut Food Bank, so we appreciate that comment. And then another one, we started New York City faith-based food hubs in the past summer. It has worked very well, and that's from Kin Marcho, and we appreciate that experience as well, and perhaps that's another opportunity for the folks trying to reach into the New York City metro market to partner with a group that sounds like they're having some success there. So with that, I'm going to go to the last question. I'm going to give you both equal time on this because I think you'll both have a point of view. Then I'm going to turn it over to Chris for the logistical wrap-up, and we'll be done. But the question is this. Would a farm that grows some of its own products and also sources additional crops from other local farms, then sells this aggregation of local crops at farmers markets and to local restaurants, be considered a food hub? Jim, why don't you start with that, and I'll let Malini do a wrap-up on it.
Yeah, it's a very basic kind of form of a food hub that I've actually encouraged more folks, you know, instead of thinking about, oh, we need this, you know, $1 million warehouse, and we need to have these 50 different accounts from all these different, you know, markets, and we got to pool resources and get 50, 60 suppliers because that's what it takes, you know. Like, start small, work with a few farmers, aggregate some product together, do some good marketing and branding of it, identify where the product is coming from. Farmers market is one outlet. We would, within our definition, if they're just selling at a farmer's market, that wouldn't be enough. It's multiple markets. But if you're selling at farmers markets, you're selling at restaurants, and you grow that and you begin to sell it to schools and other things, you really are a food hub. That's all well and good. That's the point. How can you move products from a number of smaller growers in the local area? It doesn't even have to be small, but just a number of local growers, and you know, take advantage of that market demand for local. It's a very simple model.
Malini, add anything to that?
Sure. I would say so yes, I agree. You are certainly a food hub. It sounds like your current customer segments that you're focusing on are the farmers market shoppers and restaurants. I would encourage you to explore some other segments because the growth in volume for local is going to be coming from grocery and institutional. So if you are really good at doing the, you know, the sourcing activity and coordination, you may want to consider adding on other customer segments. like the grocery and institutional side. Now, farmers markets and restaurants, farmers markets especially, it's a retail price, so it's certainly sometimes more attractive in terms of the pricing that you get. But depending on how big your suppliers are, if you want those 10-acre farmers to grow to 50, 60, 100 acres, I think that's going to be coming from the grocery and institutional demand side. So if you like what you're doing, I would say think about expanding and looking at other segments.
And just to add to what Melanie says, a good entry point to grocery stores is look in your area for food cooperatives, look in your area for independent grocery stores. These are, there's easier market entry there. They tend to, there's a willingness to kind of work with you through the growth period of that. They're trying to differentiate their stores from the larger chains, and local is one way they're doing that to kind of, keep part of that market share that they may lose to larger chains. So that's a good entry point. That's a good way to kind of test out if that's the kind of relationship that you want to grow or market you want to grow. And also, I'd just like to add Kate Valentine. I'd love to talk to you if you want to email me and talk more about Connecticut Food Hubs. And, of course, I always want to know about other food hubs that's not on our list. So whether this New York-based one that just popped up or others, the only way we can begin to identify food hubs is primarily word of mouth when I hear from other folks and they tell me about their operations. So by all means, please contact me and let me know about what you're doing.
And Kate, we're neighbors. Wholesome Wave is based in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So if we haven't already made contact with you, we'd certainly like to follow up and speak more specifically about food hubs.
Well, I'm going to wrap at this point. I want to really thank Jim and Melanie for sharing a lot of information, great answers and interaction on the Q&A here. It's been very helpful. I hope this is the beginning of the discussion rather than just like, well, we did that, let's move on. I think there's tremendous opportunities here for quite frankly, both business opportunities and social and mission type opportunities for all of us involved. And again, we've got lots of food for thought and offers of additional information and perhaps assistance and so forth. And so I hope everybody who's participated with us this morning has learned as much as we have here. Those of us listening in the control room here. So appreciate all of the good questions that were posed out there. I know I didn't get to all of them, but I do respect the timetable that we're on, and so we are going to wrap up. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody happy holidays on behalf of the entire Farm Credit East team. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you in 2012. And are very excited about working with you in 2013. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Chris Lawton for the logistical details.
Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. I think we had a great webinar today. Just to wrap up, the information that's been discussed here, the PowerPoint presentations, the recording of the webinar, as well as some of the reference materials that Jim referred to, Jim Barham referred to, those will be posted on the webinar at farmcrediteast.com/webinars, and you can access all the material from our past webinars there. Give us until tomorrow to get the material from this webinar posted. It'll take us a few hours to get it up, but by tomorrow we should have the materials posted there. So that's it. Unless there's any final comments, I'll wrap it up and say goodbye. Thank you very much.